a- okay. This meeting is being live streamed on the Men of Masculinity Facebook channel, and you can check out the website address above my shiny head of the website. There you go. So as always, looking forward to more epic conversation. We took a little bit of a break, but we are back and better than ever. And you know what? We have started off the new year with an incredible young lady, Shana James, but I'm going to read you her bio first.
I just like still being called a young lady because at some places people call me ma'am and all kinds of older things.
You know what's crazy? I've had some people say, don't call me a lady.
Oh.
It's interesting. That's a whole other conversation. But let's get, it's all about you tonight, you and I. So for 15 years, she has coached more than 1,000 leaders, CEOs, authors, speakers, and people with big visions who step into more powerful leadership and start and grow their business, create more effective teams, increase their impact, get promoted, find love. Valentine's Day coming up, folks. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, rekindle, spark, create a legacy, and become more personally inspired and fulfilled. She is known for her ability to assess in just a few minutes. She's very good at that. Believe me, I know. That's another conversation. The cause of dissatisfaction is stuck points in your profession and love life. See that word love again? Then she creates a clear and unique path for you to have true success and incredible love. Love again. Referred as a secret weapon, she cuts through the distraction and provides direct access to your confidence, power, and clarity. She's also a translator between women and men, providing effective tools to transform conversations and dynamics that have gone awry into connection and collaboration. With an MA in psychology, this certification, coach training, and more than a decade facilitating groups and workshops, starting multiple businesses and helping hundreds of entrepreneurs on their own. Her range of skills is unlike many other coaches. So we would like to welcome for the first time, and hopefully, well, she's gonna be back next week, so not the last time.
First time.
And how I met this wonderful lady, she allows me to call me lady. I was actually on her podcast, the Man Alive podcast, and look what she sent me. I keep this like on my desk. She's
it's a good picture of you.
Yeah, and the only person that sent me a unique gift like this. So folks, if you want to create lasting memories,
give gifts.
Give gifts, exactly, give gifts. How we doing? Happy New Year, how you been?
Happy New Year. It's always quite a ride to be alive, but I'm feeling good.
Good stuff. And just want to let everyone know who's watching live on replay, this wonderful lady coaches men. And also, if you check out her website and also check out her on YouTube, she has an incredible TED Talk about men. Powerful. So please check it out. So for this audience, how did you get into the wonderful journey, maybe sometimes crazy journey of coaching men?
Well, I was doing a master's degree in psychology, and I was on a path to work with women. And obviously, I took a turn. So I was part of this conscious community. We may have talked about this on another episode, but I was part of a conscious community of young, naive 20-somethings where we were kind of making messes with each other and, like talking about attraction and talking about jealousy and talking about when we got upset with each other and talking about, when we irritated each other, like we were being authentic. The idea was to be real and then to not run away from conversations, to actually stay and clean up the messes and become closer as a result. And there were two men there who found that because of this, they had so much more freedom and confidence, and they were more relaxed with women. And they started a workshop called the Authentic Man Program. And they invited women, those of us who were in the community, to give feedback, basically to be there for a whole day with men and to give feedback with love. Truth with love was really the point of it. And it just totally blew me away. I had a soul calling, right? It felt like my heart broke open into a million pieces. I got to see behind the masks and the facades that men, sometimes put up in this effort to try to be strong and powerful and not look weak or unmanly. And I really saw the humanity in men. And I also saw how my heart and my love and my care could really, I don't know what word I would say, like could really open men to love themselves, right? Like there were men who came in pain and struggling. And I saw how I could support that healing. And it was, yeah, it was like I made this turn and haven't gone back.
Wow. Who was the first person you told that you're going to coach men, and what was their reaction? If you remember.
Gosh, I don't remember, but
what was the initial reaction?
I don't remember, but it was part of this community and this workshop already. So I started coaching men after that was happening. When I tell my parents, my dad is always like, why are you coaching only men? You're missing out on half the population and blah, blah, blah. I actually, to say that I took a turn and I've never gone back, I did also create a workshop business for women on love and relationships. But it just became clear. I don't know. Did you have a moment where you suddenly knew like you were called to something?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been blessed, especially since pandemic, more and more people are wanting to interview me.
Yeah.
And my turn moment was, and I'll really shorten it, when my dad went in for his heart bypass operation.
Wow.
And waiting 4.5 hours in the waiting room saying, woulda, coulda, shoulda. And I didn't know if he ever would be alive again. Wow. And then having, by the grace of God, him given another life or giving a continued life, said that was one of the key moments for me. Because he told me, the first thing he said to me, I can touch my toes again. I go, hold on a second, you've been holding this back for years? So that was one of my moments, one of the key moments. So that was my aha.
So amazing, right? I had one of those where I was sitting in a workshop and someone said, Kara, the question maybe like, what are you here to do? And I was just sitting there and I was kind of blank at first. I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure. I was maybe in a little bit of, a fog. And then suddenly it was like I was struck by lightning and I burst into tears and I felt like I was going to throw up. And out of my mouth came, I'm supposed to help decrease the suicide for men. And I was like, whoa, okay. I don't, it feels like one of those callings that I'm still living into because it's so big.
Same here.
And collaborating with people like you feels like, that's how it happens. It doesn't just happen with me. So thank you.
Well, and it's a blessing to walk this journey with you. And as I say, the more men we help, the more men that need help.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the more men we help, the more, I think, the more peaceful our world is. But I also like to bring it back to, yes, okay, when you're healed as a man, you create a more peaceful world, a better community, you're a better parent, father, but also it's for you, right? Like it's for you that you also get to feel good and loved and understood and cared for and have a meaningful life and an exciting life, right? You matter.
Nice. So if you're watching this live or on the replay, we're talking with Shana James. She is amazing. She coaches men, and you're going to hear a lot of the other side of men through a lady's ears. I get permission to say that a few times tonight. Yes. This is good. Tell me about, before we start really rolling up the sleeves again, what were the early days like of the journey?
Oh, so deep and rich and fun and scary and crazy. Like we as a team of women, in the early days, we would do it in a hotel conference room. And so then we as women would be like in the, there was one room that we were all in. And so we'd all lay on the bed and we would like go do these exercises with men. And then we'd come back in the room and someone would cry and we'd all like, it was so alive, I will say. Right. We were so deeply touched by what was happening and the transformation that was happening. And we all grew so much. I mean, I feel like I was transformed, like being let into men's hearts healed my heart because, I had a lot of ideas when I was young. Well, you wouldn't know this, but I say, but a lot of us have a lot of preconceived notions. Or when I was a young woman, it was like, well, men are just out for sex, or men this or men that. And it blew the doors off of all of those ideas that I had, so anytime there was an all men are, it just evaporated that. And I got to see that each man is unique and each man is vulnerable and tender beneath whatever those facades are. And it really shifted my relationships and my life.
Fantastic. So, okay, let's start rolling up the sleeves here. So what are some of the assumptions that you've got vision of and have had to say, no, that's not true?
Like men's assumptions about women?
Both, actually, anything involving men, men's assumptions about women, women's assumptions of men, because you've had the blessing to really get into a number of men's hearts and minds, which probably a lot of people haven't had that opportunity, especially, you know, period, men, women, person, because we know a lot of times guys don't talk with each other.
Yeah.
Like about the deep stuff.
I know.
And the same thing, even maybe, I'm making generalization here, folks, even less so with women.
Yeah.
So here's my first question before we get to that. How do you establish trust with the men that you help?
It's a good question. I mean, I believe that trust, you know, there's the, what we could say, the doing layer and the being layer, right? There's what we say and the words we say, but there's also how we be. I think when men come to me for coaching, most of them have heard me on the podcast and have seen, you know, some of the things I've written, seen my TED Talk. So I think some of that trust is built before they come see me. But I think really it's based in the fact that I don't shame or blame, you know, whether a man wants to be in a polyamorous relationship or a kinky relationship or a very like vanilla relationship, or, you know, feels different gender fluidity or has different desires. Like I don't have a lot of judgment anymore. I don't know that I judge. Of course, we all judge as human beings, but with my clients, when they show up, that judgment really seems to go away. And I look at, okay, what is in your highest good? What do you want? What feels right to you? There's no one else who has the stamp of approval, right? We've got to figure out what's right for each person and then help a person find the sovereignty and inner validity, right? Like that they're valid and that they're good and their desires are good. So I think somehow that all comes across.
Got it. You mentioned a very key word for men, trust.
Yeah.
So not only we talked about them trusting you, but with the men you've had those deep conversations with, how important is trust to a man from your lens?
I think trust is important to humans. I think trust is very important. And one of the things that I would say about trust that I see is a lot of people come to me and have a simple idea of what trust is. Like either I trust someone or I don't trust someone. And so one of the things that I really work with people to try to get clear on is, what do you trust in someone and what don't you trust in someone? Or like up until what point do you trust someone, and beyond what point do you not trust someone? And how do you ask the questions that give you a sense of whether you trust someone or not, right? Like I remember working with a woman actually, and she was trying to get a sense of this man and whether he was trustworthy. And I remember saying to her, well, what question would you need to ask? And what answer would you need to hear to know if you trusted this person? Right now, some of it comes down to, it's not just the words that are spoken, it's do the words match the actions? And do I get a sense of sincerity in, that underlying the words, right? Does someone actually care? Or do they have lots of defensive and protective reactions, right? That tends to be less trustworthy than if someone is more of an open book and is able to be vulnerable and open.
What you just shared there, a lot of people need to hear that.
Which part?
All of it. not just all of it, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but how many men that you have conversations with say, you know what? No one's ever really taken the time to get to know me.
Know me, right? Well, and that's another piece of trust is if we trust ourselves and if we know what has us feel safe, right, then I wouldn't say it's a moot point what's out there, but if I trust that I'm going to be okay, right? If someone else disagrees with me, if someone else disrespects me, if all those things are going to happen, but I trust myself and my own inner goodness, I guess I will say, then I get to take more risks, right? I get to be more vulnerable without the fear that, oh, suddenly somebody's going to destroy me, right? I'm pretty clear at this point that I don't know if I would say I'm indestructible. I think that's a weird thing to say. It's more like a superhero thing. But what I would say is that I trust myself enough that I know that, oh, I might feel hurt. I might feel pain. I might go through a situation where I have a lot of emotions for a long time, but ultimately I'm going to be okay. So I think it's a good question to ask, right? Like, do you know that you're okay? And how would you know that you're okay? Do you trust yourself?
Yeah, because and again, you and I, I'm sure would agree on this. A lot of times people don't ask men deep about, are you, well, of course, are you okay, but really getting deep. Are you okay? Are you really okay?
Are you
And
really okay?
there's not a lot of times that they have people investing in them because they're always doing stuff.
Yes.
That stillness,
Yeah.
that's still, what do they do to invest in themselves? Do they
Yeah.
take the time to invest in themselves?
I love you are a really great proponent of that, right? Like what
Important.
really lights you up and what do you really want? And I think we started down the rabbit hole of trust because I keep thinking like, oh, right. Well, how would I know if I trust myself, right? I think that's a question that men and all genders of people need to ask too. Like, do I trust myself? And how would I know if I trusted myself? And if I don't trust myself, actually, I think it's very trustworthy for someone to recognize that they don't trust themselves, right?
True.
It's like, have I actually been trustworthy in the way that I would want to be? Well, if I haven't, then I think it's a good thing to recognize that you don't trust yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump to another conversation piece through
Okay.
your journey of a man's relationship with his father.
Important.
How important is that? Because I do chat with a number of different ladies, and I said, have you ever asked your partner about the relationship with his father? No. Say, why not?
Yeah. Jed Diamond is an amazing expert. I don't know if you know him, but
yes,
he really talks a lot about the father wound. And I think it's so important. I mean, I was leading a group last night and a couple of the men are dads. And one of the men was talking about how he's in a new relationship because he's divorced. And he decided that he was going to actually show affection to his new partner in front of his kid, who's somewhere between 5 and 10.
Wow.
And how it was a very conscious move on his part to be an example for what this kid, will live into someday. So I think, right, we see our parents and sometimes we do what they tell us to, and sometimes we rebel against what they tell us to, but there's also those underlying invisible aspects, right, where we watch them do what they do, we watch how they treat each other. That has a really huge impact, especially when we're very young.
Then the men that you've helped, do they talk about their fathers at all?
Yeah, some of them do. And a lot of it is, my dad was the tough guy. My dad taught me to be strong, which is beautiful, right? Like, I don't want to make that bad or wrong. It's just not the whole story to teach your kid or to teach a boy, man, whatever, right? Like,
but also, but what lessons are they even just getting themselves before they're trying to pass it on to anybody else?
Exactly, right? It's so generational. It just really, I was watching The Wisdom of Trauma last night with Gabor Mate. He's brilliant too. And he was talking about the generational trauma that happens and how, right, if a dad doesn't get loved in a certain way, or his dad never expressed any emotion, he didn't know what to do with that, then he passes that on to his kid and it goes on generationally. So I think a lot of us are trying to break those generational trends and actually create healthy dynamics.
We're just chopping it up here. We're going, but things are just coming to my mind. And if you can tell, we have a rapport, so we can just jump into anything.
Just go wherever we want.
We just go wherever.
I hope I'm not confusing people.
No, not at all, not at all. I would be remiss, and we talked a little bit about this before we went on live. Have you noticed anything different you're hearing from men since the pandemic started?
It's a good question. When I first answered it, I thought, I don't know, maybe not. But now as I think about it, I'm thinking that a lot more men started coming to me to say, I don't know if I want to stay in my relationship.
Wow.
Or I need, if I am going to stay in this relationship, I need to find myself, right? A lot of men came to me saying, I kind of gave up a while ago on intimacy or affection, and I haven't really, I've had a sexless marriage, or I've had an affectionless marriage, and I kind of was just going along and staying, for the kids, or just for the image, or because I thought this is just what you do. And I think the pandemic did shake that up some.
This is good stuff. You want to go any deeper? Because I have a number of conversations because it's interesting too. My experience helping men, especially during the pandemic, more of them showed up and started to express themselves.
Yeah. I mean, really, wow, that brings tears to my eyes. It's like, oh, one of the gifts of the pandemic, I think, was people suffered a lot, don't get me wrong, right? And men suffered a lot, I think, but it also started bringing things to the surface so that it was less able to be hidden in some ways.
Wow. More men coming to you saying, I can't stay in this relationship. Wow.
Or what do I do? Or do I stay, or do I go? Or how do I know? And, what would it take, right? Like, how do I have conversations? If they're heterosexual, how do I have conversations with my wife where I say, this isn't working for me, or I'm not happy, or I want more? How do I have conversations with my wife if she doesn't seem to like to have conversations? That was a big one too, that, it's seen out in, out in the world, or out in like tradition, as women are the ones who want to talk and want to be open. But I definitely work with men who are I don't know if you would say the more sensitive types, or, the nice, like men who have huge hearts. That's what I love. I think I tend to attract men who have huge hearts and have a hard time saying clearly, this is who I am, and this is what I need, and this is what I want. And, kind of they end up sleepwalking until something wakes them up.
So would you say for the pandemic, just from your lens, it has been a somewhat of a wake-up call for some men?
I think so. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like I don't know if I'm going to survive this. In the beginning, now we're all a little calmer about that, but in the beginning, men were dying in their 40s. They were healthy. It was just life flashed before our eyes, I think. So I think that was a wake-up call. And I don't know, I'm not sure if people are going back to sleep a little bit, or if, I think it's unique to each person, but I hope that we all stay awake to the intimacy that's possible, right? The love that's possible.
Well, welcome, Mr. Mark Roden. Welcome, Deborah Rosa. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. But it's good to see you, Mark. And how you doing?
Good, Dr. Vibe. Nice to see you. Sorry to jump on late. I thought this started at 9, but
That's okay. It's okay.
great to see you.
Please feel free to, ask any questions of Ms. James. She coaches men.
I was gonna say,
I
I
saw
just
her
wanted to
TED Talk.
say
Oh,
one more thing.
he said he saw your TED Talk.
You did? Oh,
I did.
okay.
I did. I checked it out when I signed up to join on this call. Yeah, it was
Aw,
great.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was gonna say just one more thing, which is I said, hopefully we stay awake to the love and intimacy possible, but I also hope, this isn't for men necessarily, this is for everybody, but for the men I work with specifically, right? It's like, I hope that nobody goes back to sleep to that sense of like, oh, I guess I'll just settle for what I've got. I guess even if I don't have the love and intimacy, or I don't have that connection, or I don't have that trust, I guess this is what I have to suffer through because I saw my parents suffer through it, or because I never had an example that it could be different. So that's what I hope. I hope that people stay awake to what I want is important and matters. And
So just on that point,
yeah.
Do you encounter a lot of men that are just settling?
I think when men come to me, they've had that moment of, oh no, like a wake up of, oh, I was settling, or yes, I am settling. And I think there's the stage of kind of sleepwalking through it. And then there's something pops them into awakeness. And so I think when they come to me, they've had at least a moment of clarity in that way.
Nice. With the men that you help, can you give us the top, maybe you can, top 2 or 3 things you coach men or help men with? I don't like the term coach, I say help.
Yeah.
Well, what are the top 3 areas that you help men with?
Well, one of them I would say would be conversations and communication, around so I was working with a man today and we were doing, my favorite is the overlap of love and leadership. And so we were working with, okay, there was an incident at work and something didn't go quite right. And how do you debrief that to create more trust and respect and have your employees be loyal to you and to your company versus like, ooh, that, I'm scared now, or I don't feel as much trust and I don't want to bring myself fully because that dynamic didn't go so well. So the debrief of whether it's at work or in a romantic relationship of, how was that date for you? Or how was that sexual experience? And actually being willing to hear what somebody has to say and what broke trust. And where things broke down. And I work a lot, I think, with men to take things less personally and be able to hear, because if you can't hear somebody's upset or disappointment, then you get stuck with somebody starting to hide from you, and then the intimacy just starts to break down, right? And then 10 years later, people look at each other and they're like, oh, I didn't really realize you were upset. Oh, well, because I couldn't hear it. And so then I just shut it down, right?
Okay, cool. I find that a very interesting concept, helping me with love and leadership.
Yeah.
I would love to sit in on one of your sessions when you're addressing that, because I don't think too many men get that. It's either leadership and love combined.
The overlaps are amazing. I mean, and it's so fun, right? Like today I got to talk about orgasmic meditation and a process for clearing, something that happened at work. It's like really, and part of what showed up was leadership. How do you actually show up in these conversations? And granted, at work, of course, it's going to be different than with a romantic partner in some ways, but are you bringing your complaints, or are you bringing your desires? Are you receiving feedback and then being collaborative and creative with it? Or are you trying to get something to go your way and missing the other person completely, right? So there's a lot of places where the overlap happens.
There's a webinar there. there's a webinar there. I'm just thinking in my mind going, just the impact of a man's love life on his leadership.
Yeah, I did one years ago. I think it was called the 7 Accelerators of Success and Attraction. So maybe I should bring that one back out.
Please do. Please do. I think it is very, very necessary.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we talked about love and leadership. Any other two other things we can expand on? And Mark, again, if you have any questions,
Yeah, Mark, any questions?
you're
over
more
there?
than happy to please join, because I know you always have great insight. You add positive value to the conversation. So don't stay silent unless you want to.
Do you want us, any questions you have before we go with our regularly scheduled programming?
No, I don't want to jump in right now, coming onto the call late. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, and I will not be shy to ask questions later.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Okay, so we were looking at.
So we talked about, you talk about love and leadership. What are
Yeah.
some other things that you hear or help with men on a regular basis?
Yeah. So yesterday I was doing a session with a man, and we were talking about, it was someone who was dating. We were talking about where the energy drain happens when there's unclarity, right? He was having a sort of relationship with a woman, and she would respond sometimes and not respond other times, and first seemed really interested, but then, you know, had issues, and then she would, yeah. So I was like, okay, you know, he said, should I do something different? And my first response a week ago or so was, you know, if you're okay with just kind of floating this a little longer to see what happens, and if the spark catches, then that's fine. But if you realize, you know what, this doesn't feel good anymore, like this lack of clarity does not feel good, then you get to say something. And so yesterday we talked about it, and he said something like, well, I want to call her and ask to clarify, you know, and just like, or he's like, I want to ask to have closure. That's what it was. He said, you know, we're not dating. It's not happening. So I just want to have a conversation and ask for closure. And I said, well, okay, that's great. And it's really different to ask for closure than it would be to speak and like say, I want closure, right? So there's a way that sometimes when men come to me, and men can be, these men can be very, very powerful in work, and you know, they go to a meeting and they lay it down, and here's the agenda and here's what we're going to do, and then somehow around women can get triggered back into like, oh, I need to ask for permission. And so that is something that we, again, the love and leadership, it's like, okay, how do you draw on the part of you that was clear over here and felt powerful over here, and now suddenly feels like you're asking permission for something that actually you could say, you know, you could say, this is what I need, this is what I want, versus would it be okay if we were to have some closure here?
It's interesting, because one of the things I learned early on in my journey helping men is sometimes we don't handle. So again, getting back to that love and leadership thing, they're like two different ends.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating how many men can handle that seesaw, how many can balance that. Like you're saying, can I ask for closure? This, you know, can I ask for closure? That's interesting. Like, yeah. For me, it's like, and I'm sure he's not the only man.
No, you know, runs a huge team of people. I mean, you're right, he's super powerful. And I think at work, he probably would be like, all right, everybody, here's what we need to move on. We need to get this clarity, we need to move on. And then it's, yeah, things just show up differently, and we get triggered because of our relationship with our parents and our peers and how things went when we were younger. You know, there's a lot of, when I was 13, this happened in my formative years of romantic relationships, and I'm still holding on to this. And I still think women are this way, or people are this way, or men are this way. And so we've got to get in there and do a little bit of clearing, or helping people remember, this is who I really am.
The men.
Hey, Dr. Bob, I had a question.
Go ahead, Lee, please.
Yeah, this is a great little topic you got. I was on a men's team, and there were 7 of us, and they were very well-paying jobs. One was a psychotherapist, one was, you know, a vice president, and most of the time the topics was something around, I don't remember specifically, but it equated to like, should I have done the dishes? It was always relationship stuff, which was the much bigger problem than any type of leadership issue at work. And
Mhm.
so I agree with what you're saying. My question to you is like, what do you think you attribute that to? If you went back, if you went back 50 years, I don't think there'd be the same topic of conversation in that
Mhm.
same circle.
Yeah,
And
that's if there would be any conversation.
that
Right.
that's true. It might be much less. But I was wondering if you had an inkling of where that might have
Well,
come
there
from.
are people who talk about how in the 1970s or so, 60s, 70s, right, there was a shift and where men started to embrace some more feminine qualities, right? We can be feminine, masculine, male, female, whatever, but right, that the feminine qualities and maybe starting to go the other way from the generation that was men were, demanding and head of the household and tell women what to do. And so I think there was a kind of flip to the other end of the spectrum. And most of the men I work with, I love their hearts because they identify as nice guys and they sometimes try to make up for men who are assholes. So it's like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to commit that, not a crime, but I don't want to, right, that crime of the heart in a way. And so, okay, how can I be good and how can I be nice? And there was also, there's also talk about how men were raised a lot by women, women teachers, men were in the workforce. And so more women were at home. And so there was maybe a more feminine role, like the mothering role was stronger in a way than the fathering role. We don't have a lot of rites of passage and rituals anymore where men are taken out into the woods, or women, people of all genders, right, were taken to do some kind of rite of passage where we connect more deeply with ourselves and find that sovereignty and find that sense of, I believe in myself and I know who I am.
Cool. Thanks.
Anything you want to add on that, Lee?
Oh no, that was really good. I think there is something in there to the shift, right? I think roles were clearer.
Yeah.
And even from my perspective, it was like, I was shaped by the 70s of what we were just talking about. And for me, that it worked in the opposite direction. And I said, I know I should be I know I should be the nice guy. And that suppressed other parts of me. I wouldn't call
I should be. Wait, so you grew up with I should be the nice guy?
Yeah. That was the role model that was out there that I was seeing. Oh,
Interesting.
I should be the nice, sensitive man.
Uh-huh.
And what that did was it suppressed, I wouldn't call it the asshole part, but
the masculine or the strength.
the stronger part that actually said, no, I want this, and there's a directness to that.
Yep.
Without being a jerk,
Yeah.
So I had suppressed that, and my journey took me to, to find a balance between the two. I could have a nice heart and also
and be
hold
strong.
a firm presence. And I found that, I find that easier at work, and it was always much tougher in relationship too. So I think there's something in that balance that I think you're got something in what you're saying, zeroing in on it.
I love what you're saying too, right? It is possible. It's what I work with a lot with men, how to be strong and tender at the same time, or vulnerable and powerful at the same time. Or, when I was talking to my client today, I said, I would suggest, in this debrief conversation of what did not go well, I would suggest going first and being vulnerable and saying, here's where I could have done better. Here's where I could grow. And then you can ask the other person, but right, that's such a balance of, I'm going to be vulnerable and I'm also going to have the strength to know my own faults or to know where I fall short of my own integrity and actually be willing to put that out there. And I can do that without shaming myself or blaming myself or going down that rabbit hole. And I can also do it without attacking or blaming outward, right? There's that middle ground that you're talking about.
Good stuff. I based on what you and Lee have just had a conversation about, is how many men that you help come to say, you know what, I don't know how to define myself as a man, because you get so many different images in society, in media, and they don't have a sense of themselves as a man.
Yeah.
How do you approach that? And do you hear that on somewhat a regular basis?
I do. I think that is, it's part of a lot of the men that I work with. And recently I was working with a client and we came to that question of like, okay, who is the man you want to be? It could be who is the human you want to be. Again, genders are melding somewhat these days. And so, right, who do you want to be? What matters to you? What's important? What drives you to get out of bed? And there can be a discovery for the first time sometimes, because before it was everybody else's expectations and shoulds. And then sometimes there's I knew who I was when I was younger, and I gave it up either for my kids or for my family or for my career. And now I don't know who I am anymore. And, you know, I'm on a journey of finding, it's an uncomfortable journey for a lot of people to not know who am I or who am I now. But it's powerful to be willing to stay in the discomfort instead of just patching something back together, you know, and living more empty.
I agree. Actually, one of the questions I ask men, especially a man who I meet for the first time, is I ask him, what would you do if you couldn't fail?
Oh, such a good one. What would you do if you couldn't fail? And what would you ask for if someone wouldn't say no?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times when I ask that of a man,
Yeah, what do they say?
Well, first of all, they've never been asked that question before. And a lot of times it's like you can tell by their body language or by the long pause on the phone.
Yeah.
That say, I'm going in. Let's go. We're going in. And I will give them time to answer. I shut up. I say, and I'll repeat that question again.
Yeah.
Because I have somewhat a Dr. Vibe belief that there are, and maybe you can share with your experience, there's still a lot of men out there that have some unsatisfied goals, dreams, and desires.
Yeah. Very true. I love that you ask that question and you don't let them off the hook.
No.
Right. You stay with them.
I have to, because if I want to know, but mostly they need to know, and as you said, to bring up those things they've given up on.
Yep.
And just recently I was in a circle of men, a circle of fathers, and I asked this question. I asked them, who do you love? Why do you love that person? And how does that affect how does that relationship reflect on your love walk?
Your love walk. Say more about that.
Well, if they are walking in love, but the funny thing is, to the answer to the first question, there were a few men that said they loved themselves first, but there were other men who said, you know what? They've never thought about loving themselves. It never came up in their mind.
Yeah.
So again, I want to ask you, how many men that you help have to go through that phase of learning to love themselves?
Many, many. My child just walked in there. You want to say hi?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing, superstar?
Good.
Good. Great to meet you.
Yes.
Oh, okay, we got a co-host. All right.
All right, why don't you take your card? I'm almost done.
All right, we won't keep her too much longer. No worries.
Not yet.
Please. That's a couple.
Go ahead.
That's so cute. That is so cute. That is so cute. So how often do you have to help men through the process of learning to love themselves?
A lot. I mean, I think anybody who I've ever coached and anybody who I've ever talked to, we are all in the process of learning to love ourselves. So ultimately, whatever the doorway is, whether men or people come in through love or leadership, to me, I think that's the doorway. And then ultimately we're learning to love ourselves, because if we can love ourselves, and again, like I said before, if we, have love and acceptance and validation for ourselves, really, when you think about it, all, like so many of the conversations where we don't know what to say, or we feel awkward, or we feel ashamed or guilty, right? Like imagine if you totally loved yourself, how much less pain would be in those situations, how much more risk you'd feel free to take, and how much richer life becomes when you're not hesitating and holding back and afraid of failing and afraid to take those risks. So I think that's the crux of it. I think you hit it.
Once in a while, I hit bullseye, put some things up in the air and hit it. Just want to tell Mark and Deborah, we only have our friend for about 5 or 6 more minutes. So if you have a question, now is the time to ask it. Now is the time. So I will give you space if you want to ask a question, because we're going to start winding it down momentarily. Anything else that you have noticed about men during this pandemic that has been different at all, or has it just either been the same but just deeper?
Well, I just want to give a chance. Do you guys want to ask questions? Anything you want to ask Mark or Deborah?
I'll put a question out there.
Beautiful.
Thank you for being on the call, by the way, really appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
So yeah, the pandemic has been interesting. Politics in this era has been interesting.
Oh yeah.
You were just talking about people, loving themselves and trying to, or embracing who they are. What is your take on anger? Like men's anger, like right now? Like I see a fair amount of it out there.
Yeah.
There's, and whether it's, around political lines, or I vax, I don't vax, or, or just being unsatisfied or unsettled, and, just curious what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah. Well,
Thanks,
I don't
Mark.
think,
Sure.
yeah, it's a beautiful question. I don't think anger on its own is a problem. I think it's when we express anger, like when we don't really relate to the humanity of the people we're talking to. I think that's where it starts to become a problem, because I was talking with a client today about anger, right? There's an incredible strength in anger that can be used and harnessed for good. And when someone can say, I'm really angry right now, without saying F you, or you're wrong, or your way is dumb and my way is right, like the vulnerability of actually just expressing, I'm angry, this isn't working for me, something has got to change here, is actually really powerful and can be very connecting. And I think it's when we turn it into a weapon, right? And oftentimes I think anger covers over something deeper that tends to be vulnerability, right? Like a feeling of powerlessness, or a feeling of not being able to impact change. And it's easier. I've watched a lot of people, growing up and now, where it's easier to express anger and rage than it is to actually get vulnerable and admit to our insecurities, our fears, our worries. That's my thoughts.
Follow up comments, Mark, at all?
No, I think that's interesting. And like personally, I feel so much better when I'm in situations that have that kind of a vibe, or that kind of a negative space, when I can just sort of step back and just be cool in those kind of situations. Somebody who has an issue because they're on one side of things and you're on the other, and to be able to like just sort of control your emotion and not get into it and not get heated. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And have compassion. It sounds like you somehow backing off. I wonder, is there compassion in there for you?
Yeah, there is. And it's also, just choosing not to engage, right? It's like, I don't, if somebody else has an issue or anger, it doesn't mean that I have to be party to it,
Right.
I just,
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, going back to loving yourself, I think one of the beautiful things that you're saying is, oh, if you don't have to prove yourself or you don't have to defend yourself, there's a lot more freedom, right? Because some people would walk into that situation and be like, well, I'm not manly unless I stand up to this other person who's angry, or I'm not powerful, and so I need to show or prove that I am. And when we let go of needing to prove anything about ourselves, then there's more choice and more freedom.
100%.
Good stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, great.
Thank
you.
you. Great question, Mark. Thank you so much for adding positive value as you always do. So appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Dr. Bud.
Appreciate it. Well, timer's winding down, so I'm going to give one more conversation piece before the person who's in charge in your household cuts you off. So we're a few days from Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
So this is my closing conversation piece for you. Okay. What is your message? We're talking heterosexual wise for women when it comes to love for men. And then what is the message for men when it comes to love for women?
For women? Well, where my mind is going, and you can tell me if you want me to divide it, but where my mind is going is actually for humans.
Okay.
That I think one of the best ways you can love someone is to be really curious about them and to assume the best. And so instead of getting all upset and righteous because I know you did that to hurt me, or I know this, or I know that, when we start to assume the best about a person and be like, wow, they chose this relationship for a reason. They love me. I don't imagine they would want to hurt me on purpose. And then let me get curious, like, hey, what happened there? Because that did hurt and it didn't feel good, but I don't imagine you would have done that on purpose, right? There's something that really radically changes when you assume the best about people and get curious instead of assuming the worst and then getting righteous.
Beautiful end. So before we let you go, how can people find out more about you?
Yeah. You can go to shanajamescoaching.com, and Shana is SHANA. And if you go to shanajamescoaching.com/TEDx, you will see my TEDx talk, what 1,000 men's tears reveal about the crisis between men and women. And there are some guides on there for both men and women. And my podcast is called Man Alive, as the mug can't see the title, but Dr. Bob, you could look for our episode on Man Alive. That was fantastic.
Thank you for all you have done, all you're doing, and all you will be doing. And most importantly, congrats on being a great mom.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for all you're doing and for the way that you really, the questions you ask are so beautiful, and the way that you hold people to, like, hey, I'm going to hang out with you in this uncomfortable place while you sink through the layers and actually find those deep places. I feel really moved by.
Thank you so much. Everyone else, you want to find out more about what we do at Men and Masculinity, go to the website, menandmasculinity.com. Again, huge thanks to Lee, Terry, Michelle, and Robert, who couldn't join us this week, but our friend will be back next week for part 2.
Awesome.
So get ready. Thank you so much. As I always end off, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. And 2 last things. Remember to give yourselves grace, and don't manage your time, manage your energy. We'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.